Assalamu alaikum, guys, and welcome to episode 4 of the Groupchat podcast Ramadan lockdown series. We've had, really beneficial episodes so far, and today is going to be exactly the same, inshallah. We've got Maulana Sayful with us today. Assalamu alaikum, Maulana Sayful.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Firstly, thank you so much for coming on and giving us some of your time. Maulana Sayful, we met when I first went Umrah. Maulana Sayful was the person that organized that package, led the tour, Al Ansar tours, and alhamdulillah, we've kept in touch ever since.
Thank you for firstly, obviously inviting me. It's always nice to catch up with people that you know, and especially during this, pandemic where
absolutely,
you don't see how, you can't really go out and about, but it's nice to just keep in touch with each other.
So what we're going to speak about today is maybe a topic that might not get discussed as much. People focus on the initial stages of Ramadan, that excitement, that burst, and a lot of people focus on the last 10 days and the significance of those. But not many people speak about that midpoint. And this episode is going to come out on Thursday, which is tomorrow, which is actually the midpoint of Ramadan. And a lot of people might be going through what we call Ramadan fatigue, maybe a bit of a slump, maybe actually feeling a bit overwhelmed that they haven't been doing enough. And we're going to try tackle what should be the response to that, inshallah. So we start off with how the problem even starts off in the first place. Why do people feel like, first of all, they feel like they're getting into a slump? Or why do they feel so overwhelmed during Ramadan?
Bismillah wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. I think what you just mentioned about, when it gets to the midpoint of Ramadan, people are slowly starting to that energy, is lost. And that buzz and that enthusiasm that was there right from the beginning of Ramadan, that slowly starts to fade away. And I think the most important thing is that I think people need to realize that it's natural. It's firstly, it is as, it's our body. How much can it take, by staying up all night, every single night? There comes a point where it's inevitable that it's going to happen, right? So I think if it's happening to people out there, they should just understand that it's just natural, for this to happen. And I think if you understand that okay, it's bound to happen some point, then I think it helps you to realize how you can actually gain momentum once again, to go through those second half of the month, and especially the last 10 nights. But I think probably one of the reasons why it might happen is because how some people like to plan their Ramadan, and I think everyone does. It's one of those things that the saying goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So everyone wants to plan before Ramadan. They want to do this and that, and they make a plan, and sometimes that plan can be overwhelming. And it's hard for a person to see that, because obviously it's good intention, and of course that person will get reward for that. But sometimes they might just, it just might be too much for them to actually take in. And once they realize, after those days are going, they're trying their best to, carry out that plan as much as they can. But then there comes a point that naturally, you start to lose that energy. Okay. And I think one of the things is that, of course, planning is important, but it has to be realistic as well. I mean, people are going to work as well during the month of Ramadan. People have got children as well to look after. You got the family to feed. So there has to be a balance.
I think what you say about being realistic, for example, and this is not saying anything about any type of person, but if you rarely read the Quran outside of Ramadan, and you plan now to read a juz a day, it's going to be difficult. It is literally, you're throwing yourself into the deep end. Alhamdulillah, some people can go through it and they do read one juz a day and they manage to do it. Other people, because it's so foreign or because they're not used to it, it requires some level of practice. They burn out. First day, second day, they're going strong. Maybe first week they're going strong. And eventually it grinds to a halt because they just want to do something. They don't want to do something different, right? How does someone counteract that? Maybe still to feel that positivity,
Mm.
but you know, manageable.
Yeah, I think it's very important to, firstly, you know, when you obviously you've got your plan ready, you've got things that you want to achieve in this holy month, and one of the things that could become a factor of that demotivation and that slump could be by you comparing yourself to others. And we just have to understand that not every single person is the same. Some people, as you said, as you just mentioned, you know, they probably used to reciting the Quran outside the month of Ramadan, and in the month of Ramadan it's easy to recite a juz, and possibly for them, you know, they might even finish 2 or 3 or 4 khatams of the Quran. But for a person who doesn't really take out that time before Ramadan, it will be hard maybe even to read one. Okay, so I think firstly, you can't compare like yourself to others, because everyone's, you know, iman is different. Everyone is practicing, everyone's on a different playing, you know, on a different level of iman. And actually that brings to mind a hadith, a story, and that story is actually quite motivational for those people who feel like, oh, I can't keep up, you know. And it's actually a beautiful incident that happens at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where a companion by the name of Handala, one day Handala is looking really worried, and he's like thinking, you know, so many things are going through his mind. And at that moment in time, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, and he walks past and he sees Handala and he goes, what's up with you? You know, I haven't seen you so distressed, you know, for a long time. What's happening to you? Then Handala radiallahu ta'ala, he explains that, look, when I'm with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's like a different experience. It's like I can feel Jannah next to me. I can almost see Jahannam. My iman is right up there. Yeah, and I think most of us, we also go through that. There are times in the year, there are moments in our life where our iman is really high. And then Handala goes to Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, the reason I feel the reason I'm quite distressed is because I think I've become a munafiq. I think I have just become a hypocrite. And Abu Bakr says, why? Why do you say that you've become a hypocrite? He goes, well, when I'm with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's, you know, my iman is really high. But when I'm with my family members and when I'm doing my daily work, I forget all about that. And guess what, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he says, you know what? I think I've become a hypocrite as well. And then both of them are like, oh no, we are hypocrites now, because when we're with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our our iman is different, and we are so much more motivated to do good things in Islam. But when we were away with our family members and just getting on with the normal routine, normal daily life, it's different. So they go, let's go and speak to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's something wrong. We need to fix ourselves. So they go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they, explain what's happened and what they think about themselves, that they are hypocrites. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if your iman, if your faith, the level of iman that you have, if it was to be at that same level when you're with me, when you're at home, when you're at work, when you're with your families, and when you're just out and about, if that same iman was at the same level, right up there, then the angels would come down and even meet you and handshake you. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, you know what? Slowly. So I think from this we understand that everyone's iman fluctuates. Sometimes your iman is so high, so you want to do 1 juz, 2 juz a day, and you can, because the reward, you've got the motivation. But then the iman is bound to dip as well, and it's natural. And the Prophet ﷺ says it as well. No one can remain in with iman to such a high level all the time, because if they did, the angels would come and even shake your hands and embrace you. So I think it's really important for us to understand, just from this story, that there are times that we are going to feel low, and there are times that we just think that, we can't do it. But I think the main thing is just acknowledging that, okay, this is something that I did not plan in the beginning. Because obviously if you plan and go into the month of Ramadan thinking that, I'm just going to worship for the first 10 days, mid-10 days, I'm just going to take a rest.
Yeah, no one plans that, isn't it? Yeah, of course. So, if you do feel slightly overwhelmed, right? And you acknowledge that, and subhanAllah, you've shared a beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. How do you take practical steps to try claw back that enthusiasm?
Yeah. So I think one of the best ways, what I would say is that you start looking at your plan that you made or things that you wanted to achieve in Ramadan, and you will only feel that slump happening if you were, really engaged in worship in the first few days. So you can do really, really small things whilst you're doing even just the housework or cooking or even looking after the kids or anything, or even working. You can take a bit of time out doing dhikr, even for 5-10 minutes. Today, I was just speaking to some of my cousins, and my sister-in-law, she was saying that whilst she's cooking, she's reciting dhikr, and her auntie, my mother-in-law, her mother-in-law, my auntie, she
Yeah.
thought she was singing. She thought like she probably sings and cooks. And she goes to her, "Why do you sing and cook?" She goes, "I'm not singing, I'm doing dhikr and adhkar." So there are small, tiny little things you can do. And I think by doing those tiny, small things during these days, it will definitely gear you up for the last 10 nights.
Yes.
And obviously you want to preserve your energy as well. So how we feel the slump in midway, don't go down to that extent where you're not doing anything at all. I think that would be detrimental, especially, it being the month of Ramadan. You want to make use of every second. But again, don't exert yourself to that extent that you tire your body out so much that in the last 10 nights, you're like just sleeping all night.
Finished. Yeah.
So I think, again, it comes to the whole notion of and concept of balance, I would say.
So you speak, obviously this is focusing on this mid slump, right? But what would you say, because the last 10 nights are coming, in terms of the best level of preparation to be able to take full advantage of those last 10 days, what would you recommend to do right now?
I think first and foremost, dua. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you the strength, to give you the energy, the strength, for the last 10 nights and also for the remaining days of Ramadan. And as we all know, we don't even know if we're going to live to see the last 10 nights. I think with that in mind, that could also help someone to really kind of keep going in this mid-Ramadan, because who are we to say, and who are we to even think that we'll live to see the 21st of Ramadan or 22nd, 23rd? How many people have passed away in Ramadan? How many people have passed away that were here last year, not this year? So there is no guarantee that we'll even live to see the last 10 nights. So I think we have to ask Allah first and foremost to give you the strength, and also for us to reach those special nights. And we know, how much those last 10 nights, and especially the odd nights, how much virtues and blessings they have. So definitely keep making dua during these times. Allah, I want to reach those last 10 nights. Make me reach those. How we recite the dua, Allahumma balighna Ramadan. Let me reach Ramadan. Before Ramadan, we make this dua quite often, don't we? And it would be the same for the 10 nights as well. Oh Allah, let me reach those 10 nights. And again, I would say make dua that Allah gives you the strength to carry out as much worship as you possibly can. And again, keep engaged with these small ibadah, standing in Taraweeh, making adhkar after Fajr, after Asr, as much as you can, and reciting as much Quran as you can. A scholar, he sent an email out the other day, and he said that before I used to tell people, look, the pious predecessors, they used to read 5 khatams, 10 khatams, we need to do the same. But then he said that, this is actually unrealistic. And it can actually put people off, because then obviously it's a natural thing for you to compare and say, 5, 10 khatams, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So now he said, I don't even say that anymore. I say just read as much as you can. And we should take happiness from that, because at least you're doing something. And I think another thing is, during this mid-Ramadan period, keep thinking, keep believing that every action that you do is multiplied. So whatever you do, you're just benefiting, right? You're not losing out on anything. If you don't do absolutely anything and just watch TV and Netflix online and goes, yes, that's you losing out. But even if you do tiny things, very small things, your rewards multiplying by even up to 700 times possibly. So I think that should be in the back of our minds, that look, let me just do whatever I can.
What's the hadith about the small continuous deed?
Yeah. So
Because it always so beautiful, but I can never remember the actual wording.
the actual wordings, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I can't say the actual
Mhm.
wordings now.
Mm.
I know which one you're on about. You know,
Yeah.
they're consistent,
Mm.
and even though they might be small, but you carry on doing them. Um, dawami, something dawami. I don't want to say the words, but I'll come up Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to those words that those small deeds are the best that are continuous. You know, you keep doing them, but you do it, you know, consistently. And I think that goes with every action that we do, you know, like for example, charity in the month of Ramadan, even praying or dhikr or tilawah, just doing bit by bit, you know, but every day. I think that's the key.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I actually wanted to ask this question, and I was going to ask you this question even before this whole episode. Generally, like in the first couple of days before I even thought about this podcast idea, was if you have intention of doing something in the last 10 nights and inshallah an odd night, you can't do that right now, right? So do you just have to wait? Like let's use an example. You want to donate, or you want to give sadaqah, right? But you want it to be on an odd night, so you want that reward, right? But it's the second, third, 15th night. What do? Do you just wait? Do you just make dua that you're going to make it? But how are you still rewarded for this?
Okay, so I think you probably mentioned it as well quite briefly, that the intention is there, right? So you having that intention, and this is the beautiful thing about our religion, and this is how merciful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, that even if someone makes an intention to do something good, a good deed is recorded in their book. Subhanallah. That is just you making an intention. You know, you haven't even done the action yet, right? So by someone having the intention of doing something good, for example, as you said, they want to donate on the odd nights, then for that, Allah has already rewarded you for this. Okay, even though we haven't even, you know, implemented those things that we want to do. And then when those nights come and then you do the action, or you do the whatever what you want to, you made the intention for, you get more reward on top of that. So I think if someone wanted to do that, as long as the intention is there and they really want to do it, say that person passes away before that time comes, they will still be rewarded with all that they wanted to do. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be an action taken right there and then on behalf of like 27th night, I'm doing this now. Having that intention, you want to do it, that's your reward. That's you've got that reward now. Okay. And of course, you know, one of the main things and main pillars in our religion is about the whole idea of intention. And I think this idea is quite useful for like for anyone around the house who's cooking or who's preparing iftar, because just by tweaking your intention, you could be accumulating so much goodness. But all it takes is that tweaking, and all it takes is the knowledge of, okay, hold on a minute, I'm preparing food. So on one side, you can just be preparing food. Yeah, okay, so people can eat. That's what majority of the people probably think, right? But if someone's making food and they are thinking at that same time, I'm making this food, my family is going to eat this in iftar so they can have the energy to stand for Taraweeh and pray to Allah. That person who's cooking is going to get all that reward. Look how much reward is being accumulated just by changing the intention. And I think one of my teachers always used to say, even when we wear clothes in the morning, right? Like who's going to walk out without any clothes? No one, right? So you wake up, you're going to put clothes on anyway. If at that moment in time, you just have the intention, I am wearing clothes to cover myself, to have modesty. It's a sunnah of the Prophet to wear clothes. Every single second whilst you are wearing clothes, you're just getting rewarded. Yeah, so it's one of the, I'm sure, I think I did mention it when we went Umrah as well. When we go inside the masjid, when you step foot in the masjid, just have the intention of i'tikaf. As long as you remain in the mosque, you are getting the reward. So again, you know, like as you said, if you wanted to give something in the last 10 nights, make the intention firmly. Don't have the like 50-50 intention. Oh, I might just give if it's the 23rd and 24th, but you really got the full, full intention, sincere intention. Allah will reward you for that, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. I think that's another thing that people could do in the next 5-6 days before the 20th night is make the intention on what they plan to do in the remaining 10 days, inshallah, and may be rewarded. So I wanted to move on to a couple of questions that I got. So I asked for questions for this episode, and one of the question was if they feel spiritually low, like for example, they are maybe suffering from a mental health issue or something like that, right? How do they still make the most of Ramadan? How do they put that to one side? Well, what can we learn from the teachings that allow someone to, for this month at least, to make the most of it?
Okay, so I think you mentioned an example there, and I think someone else also asked me another example where a sister, she messaged on Al-Ansar Instagram asking, look, I'm pregnant and I won't be able to fast during this month, but how can I still make the most out of this month? What can I do in order to kind of feel its fruits and the rewards from this month? And I think, again, it boils down to just doing the little things, things that you wouldn't normally be doing, because that will give you a sense of achievement that you've at least, okay, I never used to pray sunnah before, or I never regularly prayed my, I don't know, Zuhr sunnah before, but now I'm doing it. That automatically will give you something that you're doing extraordinary or extra special, which you would not do outside the month of Ramadan. So even those small things, firstly, hopefully, inshallah, it will give you that sense of you doing something at least, and it will give you the sense that, okay, you are accumulating those rewards. You're doing something that you never used to do, but you're doing it now. I would say even reading Islamic books, gaining knowledge of some sort, especially tafsir book, pondering on the Quran. And as we all know, this month is the month of Quran, right? And it's synonymous with Quran, Ramadan, fasting. They all sort of merge together. And I think one other thing I wanted to actually quickly discuss was, you know how we talk about the mid-slump Ramadan, right? The 15th-ish. Ramadan became obligatory upon the Muslims in the second year of Hijrah. So once they migrated to Medina, one of the first big change that came into Medina was the changing of the Qibla. That was like one of the major changes of Islam that occurred after they migrated to Medina. But the second major thing that was introduced to Islam was the whole idea of fasting. And fasting was prescribed to the Muslims in the second year of Hijrah in the month of Sha'ban. And Sha'ban, as we all know, is only 1 month before Ramadan. So the Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ, all the Muslims, they only had a month to prepare. Yeah. We have 11 months to prepare, right? We have the whole year to prepare, and think to ourselves how we're going to benefit. They had 1 month, right? But guess what? This 1 month, look at the way they prepared, because in that same month of Ramadan, that 1 month later when they did start to fast, midway through Ramadan, well, when I say midway, on the 17th, you can call that kind of midway. On the 17th, one of the most historic battles ever took place. And this was the Battle of Badr. And Muslims, despite being so low in numbers, and despite being, totally defeated on paper, they came out victorious. Why? Because they had that dua. They asked for forgiveness from Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them victory via the angels, through the invisible army. The angels came down to help them. So thinking about that, how they made dua and how they asked for forgiveness and how much tawakkul and belief they had in Allah, even though this was the first ever Ramadan, and they are fasting and they are fighting. Imagine that, we just about, can go to work when we're fasting. We get so tired and we find it really hard to do anything. Muslims, they were on the other side of the, they were fighting against the non-Muslims, and a war broke out, and it's one of the first battles in Islam, and also the most famous battle in Islam, because the 313 men that participated are still remembered. They are still remembered, and the Prophet ﷺ said regarding them, they can do whatever they want, they are all forgiven.
SubhanAllah. Yeah. And it shows, this was in the month of Ramadan, and all of our efforts that we are making, inshallah, that we will be rewarded in a certain way. So another question was, and I think we've touched upon it, was just finding the motivation to read more Quran. And I think I'm reading this question in the perspective of someone who maybe struggles to read the Quran. What would you say to someone that is struggling with these things? Yeah.
I would say to them that I'd love to be in your position. Do you know why? I would love to be in a position of a person who is struggling to read the Quran, yet they read. And the reason I say this is because, again, a beautiful hadith regarding that if a person is reading the Quran, they get reward, right? Like, whoever can read the Quran fluently, they're getting rewarded. But a person who struggles and read the Quran, they get double reward. They get double reward because of the hardship they're encountering. Maybe, they might not have learned it properly, but they're still trying. They don't want to give up. They struggle. They could just close the book and say, you know what, I give up. But they're still going. They're getting the reward twice, one for like reciting the Quran, and then the hardship they're going through. So that is a position of privilege. I think that is a motivational factor, for anyone who feels like they can't do it. And remember, I think it's very important to get this message across. You don't have to read one juz a day. If you're struggling, whatever you can, anything you read is going to be good. Of course, ideally, to finish the khatam at least once in Ramadan, that's ideal. But if you can't, don't force yourself so much that you're struggling, or you come midway through Ramadan and you slowly start to say, oh, you know what, forget it, I can't do it. So I think that definitely should be something. And regarding the Quran as well, bear in mind, one of the first few verses in the Quran is Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It is a guidance for people of taqwa. And what does fasting, what's the whole aim of fasting? We hear this verse probably so many times in the month of Ramadan, that كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. We've prescribed fasting, ordained fasting, just like we have in the previous nations. Why? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Look at that connection. To achieve taqwa, to achieve God consciousness is why we fast. And the Quran is a book for those people who have taqwa. So if we are fasting properly, this book is going to be our guidance. So if you read the Quran, and if you can't read it fluently, or if you can't do one juz a day, maybe read a few verses, even though you're struggling, but read the tafsir as well. Read, you can download many different types of tafsir books online now. You can purchase books, and just reading and pondering over those verses is so important. And I think that's one thing we should at least try to do in this month as well, to ponder over the Quran. I mean, you want to see how that verse in the Quran can relate to you. And it's actually so fascinating, because regarding Ramadan, Allah only speaks about it once. So he only speaks about fasting in this month of Ramadan only once in the Quran. And you think to yourself, what? Like, it's a major pillar of Islam. Why is it only mentioned once? Salah is mentioned, hundreds of times. Zakah is mentioned many times. Hajj is also quite a few times. But why is fasting only mentioned once? So fasting, if you look at that verse where fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about fasting in the second juz in Surah Baqarah. So it's in the second kind of section of the Quran. But prior to those verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the Musa alayhi salatu wassalam's nation, the Bani Israel, and all the silly things that they got themselves into, right? So then Allah brings this verse of fasting. So basically Allah is telling us, look, the previous nation, they lost hudal lil muttaqin. They didn't have that guidance because they did not have taqwa. But for you guys, now this nation has that chance. And straight after that verse of fasting, Allah then talks about وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. If they ask about you, how close am I? Tell them like, I'm really near. فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. So it's a month of dua, it's a month of attaining taqwa. It's got, look at the connection that it all has. It's like key ingredients going into one in this month. And I think once we really believe in all these things, it really will give us a different perspective of Ramadan and give us a different kind of shed some new light on how special this month is. And some say, you know, some scholars say, has Ramadan always been special? Or because of the Quran being revealed in this month, Ramadan became special? So that's another topic. But I think, you know, regarding what you mentioned about the Quran, just read as much as you can. You know, doesn't matter how much, how less, how much, just read.
Alhamdulillah. I think that is a perfect way to end this episode. You know, honestly, I feel inspired. I feel like I've taken away so much to, inshallah, implement for myself for the last.
And of course, I say everything. Everything I mentioned today, it goes to me as well. You know, I really want to obviously improve as well. I think there's shortcomings in all of us, and we can definitely make more use of this month. And so this advice is for myself firstly, and for everyone who's listening, and inshallah it benefits people.
Inshallah. May Allah give us the strength to make the most of what is remaining of this blessed month, inshallah. So that is the end of this episode. Inshallah, another one that you can really, really benefit off. And yeah, I need to shout out my socials. So please make sure, before I do that, do you want to say anything about the Al Ansar or?
Yeah,
please do.
Thanks for giving me this time. So what we do in Cambridge is, me and a few friends, we've organized, we've come up with a small organization in Cambridge where we like to facilitate Islamic events, Islamic tours. One being, you know, going to Umrah and visiting the Holy Lands. One of them, inshallah, soon will be Aqsa. If we can,
inshallah.
You know, I know you're doing it as well, mashallah. It's lovely to see you doing that. So inshallah, you know, Al Ansar is an organization which we thought, you know, there's nothing here that, there's no platform where the youngsters or even just the Muslims, the general Muslims, can benefit from. So we decided to start this organization up. We started in 2012. So it's been 8 years now, alhamdulillah. So please, guys, would love it if you guys can, you know, follow us on Instagram at alansar_org. And I've got a page as well, but there's no point me you guys following my page. I just whatever I learn, whatever knowledge I learn from other scholars, I do like to share it with others. So, you know, if you think it's going to be beneficial to you, then it's at ustadh.sayfulalam.
Inshallah. And you know what, I have to say, the Umrah trip that we went on, facilitated and run by yourself, alhamdulillah, it was amazing. You know, we covered something I don't feel many do. You know, it was, you kind of put us there at the time of the Prophet ﷺ when you went through the seerah, and it just allows us to really, really picture it, which I'm truly, truly appreciative for.
Alhamdulillah.
So please do follow Maulana Sayful, and make sure you follow us if you enjoyed this episode. It's on Instagram, it's WeAreGCPodcast, same on Twitter. Make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this to. And alhamdulillah, end of the episode. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Take care.